This is a review of Adventure Time Season 1, Episode 3, Prisoners of Love. In this episode, Ice King kidnaps Finn and Jake and locks them up with the princesses he kidnapped that he potentially wants to marry. Finn and Jake escape by pretending they are having fun with the Ice King. This episode's plot is actually rather uninspired and uninteresting. It's your typical fool the villain with bad acting ploy, where they get the Ice King to basically lower his guard by pretending they're having fun with him. That's really a rather boring way to solve the situation. You need your simple-minded villain, though in the Ice King's case it does make sense from a character's perspective, but it still doesn't account for much tension, and all the fun that was to be had was in the humor of this episode, which was generally pretty good throughout. However, the humor was actually more entertaining when Finn and Jake were mocking the Ice King before he captured them. And as soon as they get to his castle, the episode goes downhill in terms of overall enjoyment. This episode introduces us to the Ice King himself, and he is the reason you want to keep watching this episode about halfway through. If it wasn't for him, I would probably want to skip to the next episode already, because he really keeps the entertainment together. There are a few interesting lines of dialogue and scenes in this episode, though, and the first one is that before Finn and Jake crash into the Ice King, he's burying what seems to be a dead frog. I found this pretty humorous because is he trying to keep a frog as a pet in the Ice Kingdom, which clearly for amphibians spells death? If he is burying a dead pet, he would be pretty upset, and the fact that Finn and Jake crash into him pretty much gives him reason to displace his anger onto them. And with the Ice King's apparent memory issues, maybe he already forgot all about that dead frog and has channeled all that anger onto Finn and Jake, who are just deflecting him and making him more angry. Either way, just the imagery that's there for a split second when the box falls open. And you see the dead frog inside is just so quirky and hilarious and very, very in tune with Adventure Time's gimmicks. The reason Finn and Jake are in the Ice King's kingdom to begin with is because there's a big sleeping lava man in their front yard, which makes it too hot to hang around there. I thought this was actually a humorous backstory, and I think the joke is more effective with them not even showing the lava man to begin with. A lot of times Adventure Time has this strong dialogue that kind of evokes your own imagination. Another such line in this episode is when Jake says, "Oh no, we broke that flute trying to pick that sad ogre's heart." And that doesn't even make sense, that's a total non sequitur. But it still kind of makes you wonder and sort of imagine a scene with Finn and Jake trying to do this task, and it's just hilarious. I think it actually works better than having legitimate flashbacks that briefly show the scene and are supposed to make you laugh. I think just having the dialogue by itself is actually way more effective and way more humorous. One of the interesting visualizations in this episode is when the Ice King is forcing everybody around him to have fun, and Finn is glancing back and forth, and everyone's trying to play musical instruments or sing, and Finn just gets this Grinch-like expression on his face while he's thinking, and in any other context, or without context, you'd think Finn was the villain. He just has this really funny facial expression that's not in line with, the hero or the protagonist. So the episode introduces the Ice King himself, which is sort of a pseudo-antagonist to the series for some time to come. I really like the Ice King, and even in this very first episode, we already see lots of little character traits that make him an interesting character capable of actually evolving and having development. Watching the episode for the first time, you may not be able to spot these things and it may not seem obvious, but going back after watching the entire series, you can see that they were already laying the groundwork for the type of character Ice King was going to be, and it does sort of seem like they had this sort of backstory in mind for him. Ice King is basically prone to memory lapses, as we'll see in the future, both long-term and, as in this episode, short-term, where he forgets the context of everything that was going on immediately before, and he just accepts what it is currently and channels the emotions he's currently experiencing without thought to what had just happened. He's a really interesting character because he does seem to exhibit genuine emotions in certain scenarios. The voice actor, Tom Kenny, is especially good at channeling when the Ice King is feeling vulnerable or upset or angry, and he's very good at having the Ice King's emotions just change on a split second. Ice King is obviously, he's a sociopath. The owl says so himself in this episode. And he can't really control his emotions. He feels them, but they're overwritten immediately by other emotions. And you feel for him, and then you're angry at him, and then you think he's annoying, and then he says something and you kind of, you feel sad for him again. And it's an interesting way to introduce a villain that's relatable to. I think they did a great job with that. So the Cosmic Owl appears in this episode for the very first time, though it is not yet called that. The Cosmic Owl can pretty much serve any purpose it wants to because it does seem to be a real entity. And it does seem that the legitimate Cosmic Owl itself is traveling through the dreams, and it's not just conjured up within the dream by the dreamer. But I think one of the things it does is it sort of tells the person who's dreaming things they may already suspect about themselves but don't want to hear, don't want to accept. I'm specifically making a reference to when it appears in Finn's dream in regards to the Flame Princess. Now, it tells Ice King he's a sociopath, and Ice King deflects that right away. I do think this is evidence that Ice King may suspect that he is an unstable, kind of crazy person, and that he does have genuine problems. But perhaps it's a mix of both his inability to, make sufficient long-lasting memories and reflect back on his own actions prior, that he's able to deflect this right away. There's almost no time for Ice King to take and absorb the information that Cosmic Owl is giving him before he makes a joke about it. And now this joke that he makes about Cosmic Owl being a big nerd, I actually find it really interesting because he takes the insult that Jake used earlier in the episode and uses it against the Cosmic Owl. I think this is pretty much foreshadowing to how Ice King will become a person who admires Finn and Jake. He wants to be friends with Finn and Jake later in the series. Him imitating their joke, I think, is him kind of wanting to be like them, and I found that really interesting. You don't expect that from a typical villain, to admire the heroes. At least not in this sort of relationship that's established. I think it's good foreshadowing of his behavior in the future. Ice King does want friends, and he does want fun. F is for friends who do stuff together. Tom Kenny, by the way, also voice actor of SpongeBob. May have not known that. Fun fact. So overall, I actually was somewhat pleased and somewhat disappointed with this episode. The Ice King makes the episode. His presence just makes everything pretty much great. He's an interesting character. The rest feels like throwaway. I actually was having a lot more fun when Finn and Jake were romping around in the snow before the Ice King traps them. There was no plot there. It was just, rambunctious fun, but it was, it was a good paced. It was amusing, entertaining. You were having fun with Finn and Jake. As soon as they get to the castle, it kind of feels slow. And the princesses, they feel totally worthless and completely useless in this episode. Sure, they can't overpower the Ice King themselves, but when Finn and Jake are there, the princesses don't do anything themselves to contribute an idea as to how to escape, or during this escape itself, they don't perform any actions that matter. They've been there for multiple days or perhaps weeks, I don't quite remember, but they weren't able to, concoct a scheme to get out themselves, and now that they have Finn and Jake to help them, they still just kind of stand there and do what Finn tells them to do. And half of the princesses don't even talk, which was kind of upsetting in my opinion. They feel like throwaways, and they weren't used well in my opinion at all. The only one I found entertaining was Strawberry Princess, and that's only because the Ice King was forcing her to play that jingle on the keyboard, which was hilarious. Without the Ice King there, though, I wouldn't find Strawberry Princess amusing at all. In fact, I find her voice kind of grating and not funny. So I have mixed feelings about this. Ice King himself gets a good introduction, and his character traits are fleshed out fairly well even in the first episode, but the rest of the episode just feels quite uninspired. Alright, that sums it up for this review. I hope to see you guys next time.